Hey everybody, welcome back to my coverage of the PogChamps 3 tournament. This is the Consolation Semifinals match, the second one, Neeko versus Tubbo. Tubbo leads 1-0. Neeko needs to win this game to avoid elimination and bring us to a tiebreaker. Let's see if she can do it. Let's not waste any more time. If you missed game one, check it in the info card up there and let's get started. Tubbo has the white pieces. He starts with e4. We see d6 from Neeko going for the Pierce defense. We have knight to f3 and knight to f6. Knight c3 and c5, and now we've transposed to a closed Sicilian position. We might even see an open Sicilian if Tubbo goes for d4, but I don't expect Tubbo to know anything about those openings, and as we know, Tubbo loves to put these pieces, he loves to develop his pieces on these classical squares. He basically plays e4, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4 in all of his games, and he continues that with bishop c4. So I don't know if this is the best move for white to be playing in the closed Sicilian, as I don't play the closed Sicilian myself, but it doesn't, I know that this bishop c4 move is generally not a good move in the Sicilian in general, but maybe it's a playable move here, and it probably won't matter at these players' skill levels anyway. So I guess bishop c4, it's a fine move. You know, we can just develop our pieces anywhere here. We're in the consolation bracket, so. We have e6 from Neeko and d4 from Tubbo. So now we might transpose to an open Sicilian position if we see this c takes d4 and knight takes d4 exchange. But we don't. We have b6 instead, and this is definitely not a good move from Neeko because it allows Tubbo to play d takes c5 now, and after b takes c5, we could see e5 from Tubbo, and this is basically forking the d pawn and the knight. So if we see something like knight f to d7, simply e takes d6, and you might lose this pawn later, but for now you're going to be up a pawn. This is going to be a really annoying pawn. You might even be able to hang on to it, and even if black somehow regains it, they will have this very weak pawn structure. If you try to go to g4 with your knight, first there's h3, and after knight to h6, first you can double black's pawns with this bishop takes h6, g takes h6, and now you have this bishop d5 tactic, which hangs a bishop, but it also traps the rook, and if black takes the bishop, then we have queen takes d5, and the rook is trapped again. So white will win an exchange here. And if you decide, I'm not going to move this knight at all, I'm simply going to play d takes e5, well, then we have queen takes d8, we have a queen trade, king takes d8, and knight takes e5. White is way up in development, and black has this weak pawn structure. White's already threatening this knight takes f7, so this is already a very pleasant position for white, and also to top it all off, black can't even castle. So this definitely was a missed chance for Tubbo here. After this b6, he should have gone for d takes e5, because instead we have d5 from Tubbo, which is a fine move as well. It's just not as strong as d takes e5. We have bishop b7 from Neeko, and now this is the same mistake Neeko made in the last game. You know, in the last game, Tubbo was black. He had a bishop and a pawn on this diagonal, and it's a very similar pattern here. You know, this pawn is just not defended enough times. So here, Tubbo should definitely take this pawn with d takes e6. We could see f takes e6, and now bishop takes e6 from Tubbo. And it looks like black is doing fine because they can regain their pawn here, but the position matters. And also there's tactics in this position. So this king is very weak with no f-pawn, and you can't castle queenside, obviously. So black's king may be stuck in the center here. And also you can't even really regain your pawn here by capturing this e-pawn, because after knight takes e4 and knight takes e4, bishop takes e4, now there's knight g5, threatening a fork on f7 here. On the queen and the rook here, and also threatening the bishop. If you try to defend both of them with a move like bishop g6, now there's this same queen d5 move trapping the rook. And if you try to save your rook with knight to d7, so your queen defends your rook, now this is a mate in two after bishop f7, and if bishop takes f7, then simply queen takes f7, and this is checkmate. And if king to e7, then queen d6 is checkmate. So, or queen e6 is checkmate. So yes, white can definitely gain the advantage with this d takes e6 move. Will Tubbo go for it? No, he does not. He plays castles instead. definitely a missed win, and now this gives Neeko a chance to close everything up with e5. But Neeko doesn't go for this. He plays g6, giving Tubbo another chance for d takes e6. Will he go for it this time? Yes, he does. Tubbo plays d takes e6. We have f takes e6, bishop takes e6, and this is just a fantastic position for white. Knight bd7. Neeko continues trying to get developed, but your king is never going to be safe this game. There's nowhere this black king can go. We have bishop to f4 from Tubbo, just continuing that development. And now Neeko plays knight takes e4, which does win a pawn, but it also gives white this open e-file staring right at your king, so might not be the best call. We have knight takes e4, bishop takes e4, and here rook to e1 is just, black is just dead. That's lights out for black. But Tubbo plays bishop takes d6 instead, grabbing that pawn, which is a fine move as well. We have bishop takes f3 now, and this is this gives Tubbo the chance now to play queen takes f3, threatening queen to f7, and which means you can't. If you try to block this with a move like queen to f6, first of all, that hangs the rook. Second of all, I think you can remove this knight and then eat the queen. So a couple reasons why you can't play queen to f6 here. And if you try to defend with a move like knight to f6, now there is queen c6 check. And here you either have to block with the knight and then you lose a knight. There's king to f7. This position is horrible to play as black. The computer is actually announcing mate in 16 here, but anything wins as white. You can play you can play queen d5, you can play bishop e5, you can play rook e1, rook a d1. Anything wins here, really. And this is just a terrible position. Once again, black's king has absolutely no safety, and white is up a piece, and all of black's pieces are on this back rank. Very hilarious. But after bishop takes f3, Tubbo does not take this bishop. What was he doing? He instead plays bishop takes f8. Maybe he was getting too fancy, going for those intermediate moves. He didn't see that this bishop was attacking his queen, and now Neeko is totally winning after bishop takes d1, and Neeko is now the person in the driver's seat. We have rook a takes d1 and rook takes f8, and black is up a whole queen here, people. We have rook f to e1, a good try setting up some discoveries with this bishop, threatening bishop takes d7, but we have queen c7 now, and this does allow this bishop takes d7 check, so this would definitely be good from Tubbo, and he plays it, he goes ahead and plays it, bishop takes d7, and now black has two moves with the king. They can play king to f7 or king to d8. You got to choose the right move here as Neeko. If you play king to d8, bishop h3, and white is winning again. The only legal moves are to give up the queen, so you give up the queen and now you can escape with the king, but white is up a bishop and a pawn here, so this is going to be totally winning for white. So will Neeko choose the right direction? Yes, she does. She plays king to f7, and black is still winning here. We have bishop e6 check, and here you got to play king to f6, because if you play the move which Neeko played, king to g7, now there's this rook d7 fork on the king and the queen. So Tubbo does play this. Nice job, Tubbo. Queen takes d7, bishop takes d7, and white is now only down the exchange. They have a bishop and a pawn for the rook, so still winning for black, but white is in the game. We have rook a to d8 and rook e7 check from Tubbo. We have king to h8 and rook to f7 definitely would have been a much better move here, forcing the trade of rooks. Otherwise, white would lose the bishop, so we would have to see rook takes f7 here, king takes f7, and now this bishop has to come back to b5 to defend the bishop and also guard against back rank. You can also come to g5, but let's look at this b5 line. So now black can continue with rook d1 check, and after bishop to f1, now this bishop is pinned. You're simply going to attack these pawns, and you will win one of them eventually. Rook a1, if you save this a pawn with a3, now you can play rook b1. Got to play b3 here as white, and now rook c1. You can still save this with c4, but now rook back to b1, and there's no saving this pawn. So black will be up, or I guess he's already down a pawn here, but he will regain this pawn, he'll just be up a full exchange, and it will be totally winning for black. So he's even got the more active king. So definitely very winning for black. Neeko could have continued like this and had a very easy win. But instead, we have king to h8 from Neeko. And it's still winning for black. It's just going to be a little bit more tricky now. We have g3 from Tubbo and a6 from Neeko. Bishop a4 from Tubbo. And this is a huge blunder because it allows the move b5 and c5, trapping the bishop. So yeah, you had to escape the bishop somewhere else. Bishop c6, I think, was probably the best. But yeah, will Neeko now see this bishop trap? That is the question. Yes, she does. She plays b5, and after bishop b3, it's not too hard to see c4, but it is possible she'll miss it. But she doesn't. She plays c4, and that bishop is a goner. We have rook to a7 going after this a pawn now. And here, I think Tubbo's best chance at drawing, because he only needs a draw to win the match, is he's got to trade off all the pawns and then trade a pair of rooks and hope that Neeko doesn't know how to do the king and rook checkmate. This is the consolation bracket. You know, not everyone here knows how to do the king and rook checkmate. So I think that's Tubbo's best chance of drawing this match. We have c takes b3 and c takes b3 now. Rook d1 check and king to g2. Rook d2 check, or not check, but just rook d2 going after these second rank pawns. Rook takes a6, rook f takes f2 check now. King to h3, rook takes h2 check, and king to g4. Rook takes b2, Neeko cleaning up white's pawns. It's going to be tricky for Tubbo to draw this, but I think it is still possible. Obviously not with perfect play from black, but you know, in a practical sense, I think it is still possible for Tubbo to draw this here, if he chooses the right moves. We have rook to a8 check and king to g7, rook a7 check, and we have this king and rook dance. King to f8, rook a8 check, king to e7, rook a7 check, king to d8, and now rook takes h7 from Tubbo. Definitely not the correct move because it simply hangs a rook. Yeah, probably better would have just been trying to go after this b pawn with a move like rook b7. Black could have defended with this rook h5 move, but you know, who knows if Neeko would have seen that. Once again, the strategy here to draw this as Tubbo is trade all the pawns and then trade a pair of rooks and hope Neeko doesn't know how to do the king and rook checkmate. But this simply hangs a rook, so after rook takes h7, we have king g5 now, rook g7 defending the pawn, and king to f6 attacking the rook. So it looks like white will be able to at least win this pawn, but black is still up 2 rooks. So, you know, even if you get the last of black's pawns, Neeko should still be able to do the ladder mate. And it's kind of hard to stalemate with 2 rooks. So we have rook to g8 now and a4 from Tubbo. So definitely getting in this pawn trade is going to be good. B takes a4 and b takes a4. Rook to a2 now going after the a pawn and king to f7. And here Neeko makes a really strange move. She plays g5, hanging the rook now. Don't know what she was thinking here, but yeah, you can just save this rook and give up the pawn. And I mean, you're up 2 rooks, so you can do anything. But yeah, she instead decided to make it harder on herself and play g5. This does hang a rook. Also, I want to mention here, the players playing extremely fast. I mean, I don't think we've seen a game get this far into the game and the players have 8 minutes and 7 minutes left on their clock. Like, yeah, just playing very fast overall. So, yeah, I mean, even if Tubbo slowed down just a little bit, he probably could have saved this game, gotten a win or a draw. Neeko, she's always been playing fast. That's just how she plays. She should still slow down, but I think she's kind of in the habit of playing fast. It might be hard to change that now. But anyway, got off on a little tangent there. Back to the game. We have king takes g8 from Tubbo and g4 from Neeko. Maybe if Tubbo can eat this pawn, we could see a draw still. We have king g7 and rook takes a4, king g6 and king d7, king g5 and king to e6, king h4 and king to f5. Yeah, there's not a lot you can do here. You want to try to keep your king towards the center, though, at least. So probably king to g6 would have been a better try. Just keeping your king as central as possible, because the edge of the board is the easiest, or the corner of the board, I guess, but also the edge are easier to get checkmated than the edge of the board. So king to g6 would have been a better try here from Tubbo, but we have king to h4 instead. And after king to h5, or king to f5, excuse me, from Neeko, king to h5, and now rook to a3. We have king to h4 now, and simply after rook to a1, there's nothing white can do here. I mean, white only has one legal move, rook to h, or king to h5, and now there's rook h1 checkmate, which will Neeko see it? It's not too hard to see. There's not a lot of pieces left on the board, but hey, maybe she'll play rook g1 and try to go after this pawn. But no, she sees it. She plays rook h1, and this is checkmate. So Neeko takes game 2. We are now tied 1-1. Tubbo versus Neeko go into the tiebreakers. Whoever wins the tiebreaker match will advance to the finals. And yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say about this game. Really crazy game. Tubbo looked like he was winning it. He looked like he was going to shut out Neeko very early on. And then he hung his queen. He's just got to slow down, and he could have had this match in the bag. Now he's got to win in the tiebreaker to avoid elimination. Neeko is not going to let him do that very easily. So we'll just have to see how these players play in Game 3, which you can check out by clicking on the video on the left side of the screen, or check out my PogChamps 3 playlist up there. Thank you guys for watching. I love you guys. Like and subscribe. Stay subscribed. I'll see you next time.